Hi, I'm Melisa Idris. You're watching For the Win. Now, a year ago on May 9th, Malaysia made history. But political parties will come and go. We have 1.6 million people in the civil service who worked hard to ensure continuity in policy. Now, joining me on the show today to talk a little bit about his experience in motivating and galvanizing the civil service, I have with me YB Stephen Sim, the Deputy Minister of Youth and Sports. We're here in Putrajaya in the ministry. Thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Thank you for coming, Melissa. Thank you for having me.
So, 1 year in Putrajaya. What's your assessment been? What's your experience been in your dealings with the civil service coming in as a new administration?
I think the civil service is largely, especially here in Malaysia, under-recognized, for the lack of a word. Mainly because as political parties and politicians, when we fight it out in political campaigns, usually, with manifesto and all, and this is the manifesto, it's season for manifesto.
For the report card.
Yeah. But, usually as we fight it out in the campaign, we forget to factor in this very important element, which is the civil service, because, like it or not, the main delivery, or rather the delivery machinery of the government is the civil service. Manifestos, policy reforms can only go as far as the next desk within the bureaucrats. So I think this is a very important element for all of us to consider, especially when we talk about reforms, institutional reform, etc. When
you started work here in the ministry, YB, did you notice, was there an element of uncertainty? You've got a new administration coming in with, I guess, civil service that's been here doing things a certain way for a very long time. Was there a kind of a culture shock for both parties?
I think more so for the politicians than the civil servants.
Okay.
Because, like it or not, ministers come and go, even if they are from the same party.
That's true.
For us, my party, for example, we have been in opposition since the 60s. Never been once in Putrajaya. So more so for us. But one of the things that I realized when I first came into the office in July was the civil service. They are all very professionals, but they are very professional in their dealing with us, highly knowledgeable, they have a lot of experience, the institution basically depended on them to move ahead. But one thing I realized at that time was, within them, they were feeling, is it going to be business as usual? Is it going to be, the same kind of treatment given to politicians? Is it going to be the same kind of respect or the lack of, of respect? So I think that was one of the few early moments, of interaction between, at least for me here in the Ministry of Youth and Sports and the civil service.
Right. Do you feel you inherited a ministry that was well run?
There are pockets of problems. I think we cannot deny that. In my first week of in the ministry, I've received a lot of reports, poison pen letters, emails, memos about so and so senior officers in the ministry campaigning for the former ruling party, holding flags and giving instruction for his staff to vote for a certain party. I think that was the element of politicization of the civil service. But on the other hand, we also see that, at least within the first month, we discovered that KBS, the ministry, is ranked number 8, if I'm not mistaken, top 10 most corrupt ministry.
I remember reading that
in the government in the past. So, I want to give, if I were to give, what do you call it? If I were to give a rating to the former regime, I think perhaps the former minister was trying his best to work something out, especially within the Youth and Sports Ministry. But the fact is, he was working within a culture which is not healthy at all. There were a lot of abuse of power. There were a lot of politicking, and then contracts were given out without open tenders.
Right.
It's hard to say that we inherited a well-running machinery, but I think we inherited a civil service who is prepared to be professional if they are given a chance.
So the role of a civil servant, as part of the machinery of the bureaucracy, is to carry out the current administration's will, right? The policy as decided by cabinet, and then there's follow through implementation. I'm just wondering, because you have experience as a part of state government, you've held the seat of Bukit Mertajam in Penang since 2013, so you have experience working as the government. Did that prepare you for working as part of the federal government and with the civil service?
In a way, there is some sense of familiarity because the structure is almost the same, but because of the scale of things, federal compared to the state government, that makes all the differences. The scale of things is very dense, it's very large, and it goes into every state in Malaysia. So that is the difference. I think the difference is not just in the degree that it is bigger, but also in the density of the whole bureaucratic organization.
Talk to you about the public perception of the civil service, right? You mentioned a couple of things a little bit earlier about how big it is, the scale of it. There's perception that it's bloated. There's perception that it takes a long time for things to move, that it's a slow lumbering machine. But you mentioned that you observed professionalism. How do you then reconcile what the public is, the public perception of the civil service versus your own personal experience?
I think the public in general has a view that the civil service is lackadaisical. There's a lack of energy, it's slow in delivery. But I think one of the biggest problems is not the civil service itself. As I said, if given a chance, all of them wanted to be professional, they wanted to be efficient, they wanted to do their job properly. But what happened is this: in the past, on one hand, the civil service have to deal with what I call the internal elite unit, a civil service within the civil service set up by politicians because they wanted fast results. So they set up elite unit, staff them with maybe consultants and corporate leaders, paying them private sector wages, giving them special powers so that delivery can be done by this elite unit instead of the civil service, which politicians see as slow. But on the other hand, the civil service have to compete, or rather have to deal with external private sector contractors, many of them cronies, who are given contracts to do work which for most time can actually be done in-house. So if I am a civil servant, on one hand I have to deal internally with this elite unit, and on the other hand externally with private contractors. At the end of the day, I'm just reduced to being paper shifters.
Right.
So we are trying to change that here in the ministry. For example, we are reclaiming a lot of work that has been done previously by private contractors outside of the ministry to be done in-house by our own Pegawai Belia dan Sukan, our sports and youth officer. I can give you one example. Recently, we conducted in March this year, we organized Fit Malaysia, which is actually an old program. We relaunched Fit Malaysia, and previously under the old regime, Fit Malaysia was organized, or rather was run by event companies, private event contractors, and each program can easily cost us up to 1.3 million ringgit. Because this round we decided to do it in-house, to be run almost completely by our own civil service, the staff of the ministry. We only spend about 1/5 of the cost, which is about 20% of the cost.
And you found that the in-house talent was already capable of doing all the things.
The same quality, if not better.
So why do you think that there was a need for an elite unit, or was this a need that was a misconception in its own right?
I think what happened in the past is that on one hand the minister wanted fast results, and I don't think the bureaucrats are not able to deliver fast results. The problem is when you politicize the civil service to be your voters pool, when you only appoint or promote people based on political fidelity, political affiliation, and loyalty to the ruling party, then what you do is you begin to suppress talents and efficiency within the force.
Right.
You know, if the only way for me to be promoted, if the only way for me to be seen by my employer, which is the government, is not efficiency but rather loyalty to a political party, then I would move towards the other side.
So how are you looking to break that cycle? I mean, politicizing the civil service has been, I guess, an old habit that's hard to break. How are you going to break that?
I just want to, I want the public to know that, you know, despite the general sentiment against the civil service, by and large, the civil service is professional. A lot of my colleagues here within the ministry, they have no political affiliation. They wanted to deliver their job, they wanted to do their work well, and they wanted to be professional. So I think in that sense, I can safely say that in general, we have capable people within the force. What we should prevent then is to ensure, we should ensure that no longer promotions and appointments of strategic or key position within the civil service be based on merely party loyalty or political fidelity, but rather on capability, on merit. I think if we can do that, then we will steer the civil service away from merely being a vote delivery machinery for a political party, for the ruling party, to become a policy delivery machinery for the government and the people in general.
That takes communication, though,
Sure.
you know, and I guess consistent communication to break that habit. How has that been in terms of communicating what this new administration wants out of the civil service? And just in your experience, has there been issues in terms of communication? What kind of policy, you know, the decisions that are being made in cabinet and the trickle through down to the policy implementers of civil service?
I'll be lying if I say that everything is smooth going.
Of course, I mean, no one expects it
Sure.
not to to have hiccups.
You know, I give you an example. We, you know, early in our office, the minister and I, we decided on a very important policy change, which is to extend or rather expand healthcare service to current national athletes and former national athletes. I think it is a no-brainer. You know, we must take care of our national athletes, especially after they retire, and especially in critical issues or critical areas like healthcare. So this is fundamental, but it took us almost 6 months to get it tabled at the cabinet and approved. So there are hiccups, there are, you know, bureaucratic challenges, you know, the usual bureaucratic challenges. But I think what the minister and I here, we believe in servant leadership. You have to lead by example. You have to constantly go down, talk to them. We have, you know, in order to see through that particular policy, or even the Fit Malaysia program I spoke to you earlier. You know, we have regular meetings, and I, sometimes minister himself, sometimes me, will chair the meeting personally. We'll make sure that things are moving at every stage. So I think there is a lot of new, fresh environment where communication is being very free. You know, there's a lot of flow in terms of communication. I've been visiting the offices of Youth and Sport Ministry at various states. We try to do it in a very relaxing manner, in the sense that whenever I go visiting, I don't bring along all the mandarins from headquarters, so that there is free flow of communication between the minister's office and the deputy minister's office, and the civil service in general, especially at the at the grassroots level.
So, I mean, that's in your experience, but you know, in your conversations with your peers, you know, your other elected representatives, you know, other ministers and deputy ministers, who may not have the insight into the inner workings of government. I mean, you have some experience. Are they dealing with a certain kind of pushback from their inexperience, not understanding how civil service works?
I think different ministry have different challenges, and the problems are also different. But by and large, the new government, especially our cabinet ministers, are trying their best to deliver our promises to the people. And in that sense, the only way we can deliver our promise is to ensure that the civil service does its job. So, like it or not, the government has to work closely with the civil servants. We should not see the civil service as antagonistic to the new government and vice versa. In fact, I said this. I said, you know, many people said that, including those from the previous government, they said that 1.6 million is too many, too bloated. We should reduce civil servants. But I think from my experience in the Youth and Sport Ministry, before we even talk about, you know, reducing the civil service, I think we should first reduce private contractors, especially those who are doing work which can actually be done in-house. I give you an example. In 2015, the Youth and Sport Ministry spent more than 20 million just on one particular sort of contractors.
What kind?
Event managers.
Event managers.
Yeah, you're talking about people who...
So you outsource event organizing
to private companies. You're talking about people who does event organizing, who do logistic, the arrangement, etc.
Audio-visual elements of things.
Most of these things can be done in-house. We have 1,000 Scheme S officers who are called youth and sports officers, and their main task is to deal with youth and sports events and youth and sports in general, the whole sector. So I'm thinking, if we are already paying salaries to more than 1,000 people nationwide, why are we still paying
external contractors
to do these tasks that can be done in-house? So I think before we talk about reducing the number of civil servants, maybe we should first look at reducing the numbers of private contractors, especially for those job or work that can be done in-house.
Right, and perhaps upskilling or retraining.
Sure, yes. And in fact, if we were to, you know, contract all work outside, or if we were to outsource jobs to the private sector, what we are doing is we are thinning the talent pool within the government. So much so that these work are done outside and not, you know, within the department itself.
YB, since we're talking about addressing some of the misconceptions of the civil service and how to motivate and galvanize it, you talked a bit about the size of the civil service.
Yeah.
Can you address some of the rumours or speculations swirling around that there have been elements of sabotage in the civil service to the new administration?
As I said, we cannot deny that certain parts of the civil service is politicized, because this is what you get when you are working under a regime, the previous government, a regime which value party loyalty above anything else. So we cannot deny the fact that there are pockets of the civil service that are politicized, and perhaps some of these people within that segment is still not used to working with the new government, or in fact may even be actively working against the new government.
Is it born out of fear of loss of privilege or jobs or rights, or comes from a sense of fear, do you think?
Yeah, I think it is due to the fact that the previous government has never bothered to uphold the professionalism of the force. Malaysia, when we achieved independence in 1957, one of the key characteristic of our civil service is that it is a highly professionalized force, one which serves the government of the day, one which is very efficient in its delivery. And this was the civil service that was serving the government of Tunku Abdul Rahman and subsequent leaders. But over the years, somehow, when the old government decided that we want party loyalty above efficiency, we want party loyalty above delivery, then we are faced now with this legacy problem of dealing with people who have been promoted
Right.
because they were loyal to certain political ideology. But I just want to stress that these are the minorities. By and large, in general, in fact, within the Ministry of Youth and Sports, we receive very cordial cooperation with the civil service.
Okay, your experience has been positive.
Yeah.
But on that note, I mean, talking about those who have been promoted for, as a reward for certain, I guess, political allegiances, I want to talk a bit about your experience or your observations in terms of diversity and inclusion within the civil service, particularly female representation. What has that experience been like in the Youth and Sports Ministry?
In general, the female participation in the civil service is quite high, but not at the top level.
Right, because you look around, even anecdotally, you can see that there's a large, almost half of it is women.
Yeah. But mainly at the operation level. But when you come to top management, then that's where the number of female civil servants is fall short. Yeah, but within the ministry, the Youth and Sport Ministry, we are looking at quite a positive sign in the sense that at the top management level, we are looking at least 40% female holding important decision-making positions.
Wonderful.
For example, our Secretary General is a female, the KSU is a female, Dr. Wachala. One of the two Deputy Secretary General is a female. The head of the Youth and Sport Department is female. We have a network of 22 vocational institutes all over Malaysia. It's headed by a female, Dr. Washita. The sports commissioner is a female.
And that's important, right? To bring a perspective to sports, because sometimes policy made in sports can often be gender neutral.
That's right. One of the things that we noticed when we came in, the minister and I, is that when we talk about youth or sports, a lot of time we are looking at it from a gender neutral perspective. And when it's gender neutral, more often than not, it is inclined or it's orientated towards a male perspective, because that's the mainstream. So one of the things that we did was last year, towards the end of last year, we set up this gender mainstreaming committee within the ministry, chaired at the highest level by the minister himself. And the mission or the objective of this committee is to look at policy making within this ministry from a gender perspective, from a gender lens, so that we look into what are the differences between male and female youth sports, what are their needs, what sort of resources, how do we balance the allocation of resources so that government resources is fairly distributed.
Right. And you're really addressing the needs
That's
of
right,
both the male and female athletes. That's really wonderful. But also, since you are the Youth and Sports Ministry, how are you looking at injecting more youth into the civil service? I mean, that's about attracting new talent and
Right. I think we, in order to galvanize the civil service for the future, we need much more young energy and young talent. And within this ministry, we are looking at encouraging young people through programs such as Fellow Perdana, which places youth in internship position with ministers, cabinet ministers.
Oh, so almost
exposing
like
them to how the government is being run, policy making, and parts of the work of the civil service. And we are also looking at a new program called Fellow Corporate, where similar to Fellow Perdana, but the difference is that this internship is with GLCs. So we want to expose young people to the government in general. So no longer we are living in an era where government is conducted in behind closed doors, distance from the people. We want to endear young people to government, not because we want them to, you know, vote for us. Yes, vote for us if you like, but I think more importantly, we wanted to show them that being in government, being in the civil service, is one way and one channel you can serve your country. I think this is important. We want the best talents in our country, young talent included, to make the civil service as a viable option. You know, a lot of, you know, the natural choices for some of our best minds is usually the private sector.
Yeah, I mean, civil service is often the last resort.
So
sometimes.
we want to change the perception that we want the best talent to be serving our country. You know, yes, you can do it through the private sector, but we want you to be in the government sector, in the public sector as well. And we have appointed young and dynamic leaders, for example, Encik Faiza to head the National Sports Institute, and another young person, I think he is now in his 20s, late 20s, Encik Ahmad, the acting CEO of Impact Malaysia. So we want to see more young people coming on board to serve the country together.
Well, as we wrap up, I'd just like to get your final thoughts on what you think is, I mean, are the necessary ingredients to creating a world-class civil service, and whether you're optimistic we'll see this.
I am optimistic, Melissa, because I think the experience in the past 1 year with the civil service has made me aware that there are a lot of good people in the force, and they wanted to be professionals. They wanted to be efficient. They wanted to do their work well. The question is whether the political masters would give them the opportunity to do so. I think the new government, the Pakatan Harapan government, is ready to rebuild not only the country in general, but also to rebuild the civil service, to be, you know, to restore what I said, to restore the professionalism and the dignity of the civil service as one of the best government delivery machinery, not only in the history of our country, but also in the world.
Well, thank you so much for speaking with me today. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you.
That was my conversation with the Deputy Minister of Youth and Sports, YB Stephen Sim. Now that's all the time we have today for the Win. I'm Melisa Idris. I'm going to be back with you same time next week. I'll catch you then. Thank you.